Welcome to IVF This, episode 103, The Drama Threshold and Making Decisions. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're all doing so well today. I'm doing well in my little corner of the world in Texas, where I live. We have a little event that happens every year, starting around December, and it's called Cedar Fever. Now, if you're not familiar with Cedar Fever, there probably just means you don't live in Central Texas. But if you are familiar with seasonal allergies, then you have a pretty good idea of the sheer misery that Cedar Fever creates. Starting in late December every year, male mountain cedar trees release pollen with such effervescent ambition that you can imagine that the intent of this particular tree is to repopulate the world with only this tree. Like humans, animals, and all other organisms be damned. So I haven't checked today, but I think at last pollen count, Austin was around 50 billion parts per billion. I don't know, give or take 15 or so billion. So if it sounds like I'm dying, it's because it's true. I'm kind of dying, but this happens every year, and my track record for actually surviving has remained unsullied. So I'm optimistic. But at any rate, let's talk about some stuff. So before I get into the topic for today, I want to take a second to remind everyone that I do mini sessions. The mini session is 30 minutes of coaching on whatever topic you would like help with. It's completely complimentary, no strings attached. So if you like the coaching experience and you want to talk about what it would be like to work together, logistics, all of that, then we would do that after the 30 minutes. We would build in about 10 minutes after that. But the 30 minutes is specific coaching time just for you. So you can find the link to schedule the mini sessions on my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com, under Work With Me, or it's also listed in my bio on Instagram and Facebook. Both pages are at IVF This Coaching. All right, let's get into today's topic, which is all about making decisions. There are no shortage of decisions that must be made during the infertility journey, during fertility treatments. Really, there's no shortage of decisions that would need to be made at any point in your life, but I want to keep it focused on infertility and IVF. Things like when to see a doctor, if I should see a doctor, when or if to start treatments, what type of treatments, finding a doctor to work with that you have and feel confidence in, finding a new doctor that you might want to work with, a new clinic, or doing clinic shopping. What type of supplement support you might want. Supplements meaning like actual physical supplements, or acupuncture as a supplement, therapy, coaching, energy healing, you name it. There are choices to be made. There are some people in this world that would describe themselves as indecisive, just kind of at baseline. Then there are some of us, when dealing with overwhelm, that will just shut down in the face of making decisions. Maybe you try to bury your head in the sand. Maybe you ask someone that you trust to take the responsibility of making those decisions for you, whatever the case may be, right? So I'm going to talk about why we often get paralyzed in our thinking and decision-making, and how you can get unstuck and feel more confident in your decisions to help you make more powerful decisions to support the life that you want. And I'm going to share with you a brain hack that I actually use for my ADHD to get things done. So if we boil everything down and just be as succinct as possible a statement, it would be the reason you might be struggling with making a decision, whatever that decision may be, is because you want to make the right decision. The desire, this need to feel like you've made the right decision, is often why and when we feel stuck. How many of you run through scenario after scenario after scenario trying to figure out, if I do this and then this happens and what might be the result of that? Firstly, I would guess that that's a near unanimous human experience. And secondly, it's also an aspect of perfectionism. The idea that there is one right choice is inherently flawed. And thirdly, and this will come as no surprise if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, but decision paralysis is caused by your thinking. So the first thing I want to make sure all of you understand is that decisions aren't right or wrong. Decisions are just decisions, right? Think about it. If there was such thing as an objective right or an objective wrong decision, then everyone would agree on all the decisions all the time. But they don't. They don't. You don't ever agree. What might be a good decision for you might be a bad decision, right? Quote unquote, bad decision for me, based on our physical, emotional, psychological, financial needs or bandwidth. Good versus bad, right versus wrong is subjective. They're determined by the individual. It's subject to interpretation. Good or bad, right or wrong decisions have nothing to do with evidence. We think that they do. We think that they have to do with facts, but they don't. And if we want to learn to make powerful choices, powerful decisions, we have to understand this. If there was an objective way to always make a right decision, then we could just document the process and follow it each and every time. But there isn't, and we can't. And this might sound like terrible news. I understand. But I promise you, it isn't, because if decisions aren't objectively right or objectively wrong, then we can decide even after the fact, even if some people don't agree, that we made the right, quote unquote, right decision for us. We get to be the boss of whether a decision is right or a decision is wrong. Since the only way for us to decide if a decision is good or bad or right or wrong is by judging it retroactively, we can proactively decide how we want to feel about it. So let me give you an example from my own IVF journey. A lot of you know that in May of 2021, we went through our second full round of IVF. Previously, we'd done one full round and 2 transfers, one transfer being successful and one transfer not. On paper, this probably didn't look like a great choice. I had already turned 37. I had 1 ovary, diminished ovarian reserve. This would be completely out of pocket because we don't have insurance that includes fertility treatment. We had just had our heart shattered about 8 months prior with a failed transfer. We already had 2 beautiful kiddos. I'm not like immune to the fact that this decision on paper and to other people probably didn't make sense. Now, most of the feedback that we got was good, right? Most of the support that we got was amazing. But there were people around us that disagreed. There were many who asked, why? Why would we put ourselves through this again? Why would you spend another $30,000 for just a glimmer of possibility? And as predictable, many people offered their extremely unsolicited opinions. And while we did have the financial means to do another cycle, it wasn't like we just had it laying around with nothing else to do. It was available to us. I certainly would have loved to have paid off my student loan debt with that money, but that has unfortunately been taken because that's how we make babies. But my husband and I spent a lot of time thinking, reflecting, talking about, and praying about this decision. This decision wasn't made lightly, and a lot of our work around making that decision was understanding that we were walking into this fully well, knowing, understanding, and really at a granular level, accepting we could have our hearts broken. It was like we were there laying down $30,000 to put our own hearts on the chopping block. But even in the presence of differing opinions, even in the presence of, a lot of uncertainty, even in the face of the possibility of a tremendous amount of pain, I just decided proactively that I made the right decision. Well, we more specifically, but you get it. I decided what my reasons were for making the decision and that I really liked those reasons. And it was one of those kind of big moments in my life. And I've had it before, but it's always kind of revelatory for me when I truly let it sink in that no one else got to decide what was right or wrong because it didn't objectively exist. So I could then stop worrying about, will I make the right decision? What am I making the wrong decision? Nope. It wasn't even an option to entertain that inevitable thought spiral my brain would take me down. That does not mean that I never thought, did we make the right decision? Because of course I did. I'm human. And that's a 100% human thought. The answer was though, yes, we did. Because it was the right decision for us. After I've made a decision and maybe my brain is wanting to drum up a little drama about it, one of the most effective ways for me to kind of turn down the volume on that thought, on that natural brain spiral that we go through, is to tell myself I made the best decision I could with the information that was available to me at the time. And I like my reasons for making that decision. And if I need to, I can remind myself I'm a grown-ass woman who gets to make these types of decisions. Now, you might be asking, what if the decision to be made I don't want to make? And I had a client very recently who experienced a miscarriage following a transfer. And then the next month, she felt pregnant. She felt like she'd gotten pregnant spontaneously. And so she did a home pregnancy test and it was positive. So she went to a reproductive endocrinologist and they did some lab work and an ultrasound, and the doctor concluded it wasn't a new pregnancy, it was retained products of conception. And she advised my client to do a D&C very quickly, like within the next 2 days or something. And the reason was to avoid any potential complications associated with retained products of conception. My client really, really struggled with this decision, as I'm sure most of us would, right? On one hand, she didn't want to put in jeopardy her health or her future reproductive health. She also didn't want to end what could possibly be a viable pregnancy, right? There was no good, quote unquote, good option. And most importantly, what we wanted to honor was that she didn't want her doctor to be right about this, right? She didn't want to have to make a decision like this. This type of decision, and what we talked about on that call, was that there wasn't a scenario that she could walk away feeling good, feeling happy, feeling content, feeling joyful, right? Those were not going to be accessible emotions for her. There was not a path that did not equal pain. Either choice would have been painful. And I think that comes up a lot in fertility treatments, right? So sometimes we talk about taking time off from fertility treatment. Sometimes we talk about just stopping treatment altogether, right? And we think that one of those options will feel good. But those two options, either one, whatever scenario we're talking about, there's not a path without pain. Okay? There is the fact that you will have the pain and uncertainty with continuing on, or you will have the pain and uncertainty that comes with taking time off or stopping treatments altogether. And so what's fascinating about making decisions is that really, truly, the worst thing that can happen after you've made a decision is that you're going to have a feeling. Seriously, the worst thing that can happen to you after you make a decision is that you're going to have a feeling. Now, that's not minimizing the feelings that you have or the intensity to which you will feel it, but rather the acknowledgement that the mental gymnastics that you are trying to do to make a decision in the service of the question, how do I do this and avoid pain? And by pain, that can look like a lot of different things. It can be grief, it can be physical pain, it can be doubt, it can be uncertainty, an inconvenience, anything like that, right? But if you're all in on feeling the feelings and you're willing to feel the emotions, and remember, by the way, that we create emotions with our thinking. So if you're willing to feel the worst feeling, which for most of us is probably embarrassment, foolish, rejection, shame, if you're willing to feel that and we believe in our ability to handle any emotion, then letting one flow through us isn't really that big of a deal. Like, it's not great, it's not awesome, it's not something that you look forward to, but it doesn't have to be paralyzing. Plus, truly, and this one is for real, if we're the ones creating our thinking, meaning our feelings are only happening to us when we have a thought that creates them, the story that we tell ourselves about the decisions we've made will be the only reason that we feel the way we feel. So we actually get to determine how we feel based on how we choose to think, no matter what. We can always choose to think that we made the best decision we could at the time. When we make a choice, when we've decided that we've made the best decision we can with the information that we have available, this is the epitome of having your own back. And that's what we're here to learn how to do, to love yourself through the hardest of the hards. So let me tell you this brain hack that I talked about at the top of the episode that I use when I make a decision. And I call it the drama threshold, which is like a categorization of things that I am willing to manage my mind around versus things I am not willing to manage my mind around. So if I go back to the personal example from the top of the episode, I was willing to manage my mind around all of the uncertainty and all of the physical discomfort associated with an IVF cycle. That was something I was willing to do. I was willing to allow all of the feelings, all of the thoughts that will inevitably flow through my brain. I was willing to hold the potential for an enormous amount of pain should things not work out the way I had hoped. What I was not willing to do, or rather what I was less willing to do, was manage my mind around the idea of walking away from the family that I had dreamt of without one more try, right? Now that was us. And it might be that you're more willing to manage your mind around what it would look like in the reverse scenario, right? There's no right or wrong. When I am describing the drama threshold to my clients, I tell them, what is the threshold for your brain to not throw such a fit that you cannot move forward with a decision? And my example usually is pretty innocuous, I understand. But when I set out for a run, because I like to run, there are some days that I want to run, say, 5 miles. But my brain is kicking up all kinds of drama. Like, that's too far, it'll take too long, whatever that is, right? I can pretty much set my clock to the fact that my brain is going to offer me something in that realm, right? When it comes to my runs. So I established a drama threshold. So maybe my brain will howl at the idea of 5 miles, but maybe it's more willing to accept 3 miles. So 3 miles for that specific scenario would be my drama threshold. It's that point in which I can make a decision that supports the type of life that I want to lead, but I don't have to wade through a bunch of drama to get there. I don't have to white knuckle my way through it. Now, there are some times that I get to the 3 miles and I'm done, finito. And that's fine. Because when you set your drama threshold, you are also recalibrating your expectations for yourself. Then there are also sometimes I can talk myself through when I'm approaching, let's say, that 3rd mile. And I'll tell myself, well, since you're already out here, we might as well just do the other 2 miles. Either way is fine. It's a beautiful process because I haven't forced myself into something that I don't feel comfortable with. But if I'm there, I can either choose to finish when I said I was going to, or to push through if that's what I also choose, right? It's totally up to me. I've used that hack for a long time for many different things because a huge part of my ADHD and ADHD in general is executive dysfunction. So I glitch out when I am trying to start something because my brain goes through all the necessary steps of things that I think have to happen in order to do that. And it becomes incredibly overwhelming. So another example specific to IVF, a client that I'm working with, she's gone through several rounds at this point and has had a lot of disappointing news come from her doctor in their doctor's office. To the point where it was almost when her doctor's office number would pop up on her caller ID, she would start to get nervous, heart palpitations, sweaty palms, nausea in her belly, the whole nine, right? And it got to a point where it was very challenging for her during her stim cycles because you get so many calls and emails, from the retrieval date, day 1, the fertilization report. Many clinics do a day 3 blastocyst report. Most do a 5, some do a 6 or day 7 report. And then if you do chromosomal testing, which she did, so she was kind of seeing the natural attrition, right? The natural dwindling of numbers that occurs in IVF, but she was seeing it in real time and it was really hard for her. So when we were talking about this, she decided that her drama threshold was that she was willing to manage her mind around waiting until all of the information was available rather than getting it piecemealed, piece by piece over several days. She liked her reasons. And when she went through her next cycle, she didn't get a call from her clinic until all of her blasts were sent off for testing, right? She got all of her numbers then, her fertilization report, the blast report, all of it. That was her drama threshold, finding it out all at once. She was willing to manage her mind around that versus having to manage her mind around getting it piece by piece, day by day over the course of what can be sometimes 3 or 4 weeks. Now, All of that to say, no matter what, I want you to decide you've got your own back. Making decisions around fertility and fertility treatments is tough, but it gets easier when you decide you won't be mean to yourself afterwards. No matter what happens as a result of your decision, beating yourself up is optional. Your friends might not like it. Your family might not like it. You might be tempted to tell yourself that you should have done it differently. But I want you to remind yourself that you are not a psychic. You made the best decision you could at the time. And with new data, you can make new decisions. We live life forward. Be your own champion as you make whatever decisions are in front of you this week. And that is what I want for each and every one of you. Okay, that is what I have for you this week. Have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.